Great. Thank you so much, Mike. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with all of you about the work that we have been doing to support youth service within the State Service Commission network. I'm going to fly through my slides and information here quickly because I know we're already running a little behind time, but also hope that you'll take some time to dig more into the report that was shared on the website. I'm Rachel Bruns. I'm the Chief Engagement Officer with American Service Commissions. And for those of you that may be unfamiliar with state service commissions are the entities in 49 states, as well as Guam, Puerto Rico, DC, that administer AmeriCorps state programming and promote an ethic of service and volunteering in their respective states and territories. And ASK, as their national association, we provide training, technical assistance, and do a lot of advocacy to help increase and improve national service and volunteering throughout the country. A little bit more about state service commissions. Right now, commissions administer about 75% of all AmeriCorps state and national funding, which certainly has a small role in supporting youth service throughout the country. We also have 20 state service commissions that administer the Volunteer Generation Fund, which currently does support youth service and service learning activities within those respective states. And also about 95% of all commissions are involved in volunteer engagement more broadly in some capacity. And so that's something that commissions already are playing a role within the broader nonprofit capacity building and volunteer engagement space, with which youth service plays a role in. And then, as I mentioned, as part of their work at the state level, all commissions are supporting service in some capacity. So I want to encourage all of you to take some time to learn more about your state service commission, and you can find information about them on our website. So specific to youth service, a couple of years ago, America Service Commissions took a look at what role state service commissions were playing within the youth service space. So we did a survey in 2018, which saw that about 20% of commissions had some existing established activities within youth service that were separate from their AmeriCorps state programming. In addition, 25% of commissions said that they had some programming, but they wanted to expand. And then 29% said they didn't have anything in this space, but they were interested in growing in this space or starting something. And then 39% reported funding AmeriCorps grantees in the youth service programming space. So this was in 2019, so a few years ago, and this really led us to look at how can we support commissions to expand and grow in this space where they haven't been able to support youth service as much in the past due to largely capacity and funding limitations. We are fortunate to apply and receive a grant from the Mott Foundation, which enabled us to provide capacity funding to 11 state service commissions to really look at how they can grow and expand youth service in their respective states. So you can see the list of 11 state service commissions that received that $20,000 grant. This work started last summer and will be finishing out later this year. But we're really excited that these 11 commissions have been able to explore and better understand what's happening around youth service in their states, as well as deepen some of the work that maybe already existed. Some examples of some of the ways that commissions are already supporting youth service right now. Michigan, through the Michigan Community Service Commission, utilizes the interview platform to really focus on youth volunteer service and help students create service resumes. The Kansas Volunteer Commission has a program called Connecting Students to Communities, which works to inspire middle school and high school and college students to get more involved in their communities through service and team-based projects. Youth Serve Utah has a new tool called the Community Engagement Pathway Survey, which aligns students with their interests to help them figure out kind of what civic engagement or community engagement pathway is of alignment with their interests. And then Engage Arkansas did a survey assessment earlier this year about their existing community service learning credit, which has been in place for several years. But that survey that they just conducted is helping them assess that and see how they can improve that within their state. So those are just a few examples of some of the things that are already happening. And we're really excited about the work that will hopefully continue as a result of this work. So the report that you all have access to on the website is really an internal facing report for our network. So hope you'll find it interesting, but know that it's really inward facing to America Service Commissions and state commissions around what are we seeing around youth service across the country. So kind of what's the landscape, but then what role can state service commissions play to hopefully help support the expansion of youth service programming. Part of that report includes a database of existing youth service programs that we found as part of that assessment. So some of you may find that of interest. And then through that report, we found that, not surprising, funding is a big area of need for commissions in order for them to then provide funding to their local communities. And so later this year, we are going to be releasing a toolkit for state commissions to hopefully secure more funding for youth service within their respective states. And again, when we're talking about funding for commissions, we're talking about resources they can receive to then hopefully sub-grant out to local organizations at the state level. So you can read more about that report both on the YSA website, but also on our website at statecommissions.org/youth-service. Real quickly, just a few of the findings from the report, and I'm guessing many of you will not be surprised by these findings. Through our assessment, we found that there's a lack of on-the-ground organizations that are really solely dedicated to youth service. It's also really hard to find youth service opportunities based on inconsistent online search terms used by organizations. So if I'm a young person looking for service opportunities in my community, through our analysis, it was really hard to find those opportunities. Some organizations were more likely to stand out and are more effective at advertising and promoting those opportunities to young people. And also, not surprising, the term service learning was not consistently applied and not always correctly used with fidelity. We also found that youth service is talked about more exclusively for young adults 12 to 18, and there was a lack of opportunities for younger 3 to 11. And then we also saw that when we were doing this survey last year, there were some early indications that educators saw the connection between youth volunteering and that connection to improved educational outcomes. And then we also saw that programs consistently noted that youth volunteer participation rates were lower among youth from low-income families, as well as racial and ethnic minorities. So what our recommendations are through this report to state service commissions, as well as opportunities for America Service Commissions as their association, was really looking at building off of the existing infrastructure and assets that commissions have. One is that many state service commissions already serve as a convener in some ways in their state. And so building off of that and encouraging commissions to serve in that convener role by building a statewide coalition, bringing organizations together at the state level that are interested in youth service, and helping facilitate conversations and resource sharing. We also want to, again, encourage those building off of existing successes, looking at replicating models from state to state, strengthening the nonprofit sector. Most commissions already are playing a role in nonprofit capacity building, providing training and technical assistance. So incorporating youth service, service learning, and other aspects of young adult engagement into the work that the commission may already be doing. And then looking at state level advocacy. So how can commissions work with their state legislators, their governor's offices to really incorporate youth service as a priority into the work that they're doing? And then finally, really looking at the national level, how can we continue to support and advocate for youth service being incorporated into the infrastructure at a federal level, increasing funding for youth service and service learning. And then the last but not least, which relates to all of these, but the need for more funding in this, because we know that capacity is a big area of need, and ensuring that funding is reaching the organizations that need these resources most. So there's specific examples in all of these areas of recommendations in the report. I would love for you all to take a look at those recommendations and provide us feedback on what resonates with you, what may be missing in the report. If you're a local organization, how you would love to see your commission support youth service and service learning in your state or territory. We'd love to hear from you because this is definitely the beginning, not the end, of how we hopefully will see commissions step more into the space of supporting youth service. With that, again, encourage you to reach out to myself, Rachel Bruns, or my colleague, Ali Zul, who's our volunteer engagement manager, if you have any questions or recommendations for us. With that, Mike, I will turn it back to you.
Great. Thank you, Rachel. And next up is Amy Mears from the National Youth Leadership Council on some findings after a team collected the wisdom of the field during the National Service Learning Conference in April. So Amy, I will turn it over to you.
Wonderful, thank you. And I'm going to just share my screen and stay off video so we can have a little bit more consistency here with the presentation. But for those who aren't familiar, the National Youth Leadership Council, we've been around for nearly 40 years, and we have a vision that all young people become civically informed and engaged global citizens by participating in those service learning experiences. So we invest in youth as leaders. We support educators to bring service learning into their classrooms, into their after-school programs. And we work to support to advance the field of service learning through advocacy efforts, funding, building, field building, partnership, collaborations, activities that'll help more young people have the opportunity to engage in these service learning experiences. So during our 2022 National Service Learning Conference in April, we brought together the service learning field, and there were teachers, K-12 teachers, after-school educators, coordinators, community-based organizations, funders, students, higher ed faculty and staff who came together to share their perspectives on what the state of service learning is today, how we can empower youth, foster learning and creativity, and support youth-adult partnerships while solving problems and creating societal change. And then while examining these issues, we were looking at what was happening in the world today and the impact that's having on education through a service learning lens. So over the course of the 4 days, participants gathered in what we called wisdom circles. So it was 4 days, 4 facilitated sessions addressing 4 questions. And those were, how can service learning address the current mental health in educators? How can service learning be used to build equitable and inclusive social systems? How can service learning be used to meet the needs of education systems and educators? And how can service learning support the current needs of students while preparing them for adulthood? And through that, also keeping in mind, it was 2 years of the COVID-19 pandemic. There was widespread protest of systemic racism. We had the 2020 presidential election, the insurrection on January 6th of 21, and of course then in 22, the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. So a lot of issues that our participants were thinking about as they engaged in answering these 4 questions. And so as we were looking at mental health, the participants identified really a surge in students' mental health struggles, which I think we're all very aware of. The higher rates of depression and anxiety, that challenges of online learning, and then that return to in-person. And so the students really emphasized that throughout the pandemic, both educators and students, that they had experienced many factors and were struggling with mental health. And so, they had increased negative self-talk, increased fatigue and stress, decreased motivation, a lot of conversation around some of the triggers around mental health that these young people are dealing with. And so the participants really underscored the need for us to advocate for service learning in schools to help improve student mental health, not only for students, but also for educators and community members. Educators and students really believe that student-led discussions and the service learning process can be used to target mental health needs and break down stigmas in schools and communities. We also looked at inclusivity and equity. And so our participants identified service learning as a method for improving inclusivity and equity in schools and communities because it provides leadership opportunities to youth from historically excluded communities. It creates safe space for students struggling with mental health. It provides opportunities for youth to be heard in their schools and communities, and it helps young people forge meaningful pathways for their future. We know service learning can be a culturally relevant pedagogy, and it can help define students' success in diverse ways. It helps students appreciate their own culture, it equips students with tools to address real-world problems and inequities. And so participants shared that while all students can benefit from service learning, those who benefit most include students from those historically oppressed and underserved communities. It's youth who are passionate about addressing issues in their own communities, and students who have been historically excluded from academic and school leadership opportunities. And also those learners whose needs aren't met by that kind of one-size-fits-all pedagogy. So they were very passionate about how service learning can help build that inclusivity and equity. We also talked about educators and systems. And so our participants really emphasized the ways in which service learning can foster positive youth-adult partnerships and student-teacher relationships that really impact student learning. They very much believe that when teachers show they care, students feel more motivated and they're invested in their learning. And that the educators in the room spoke specifically about how service learning motivates teachers by providing opportunities for autonomy and professional judgment. And they also feel more supported by the family and community when they're partnering around service learning efforts. I think I just want to share, we had one participant who has been implementing district-wide service learning for many years, and they talked about the importance of educators achieving buy-in at the education system decision makers. So our superintendents, our principals, those guiding what's happening in their school districts, and how specific academic goals and standards are met for students through service learning. And then we also have, we address youth preparation for adulthood. And so the participants really expressed that service learning can be used to meet those long-term needs of young people by creating opportunities to develop important skills for the future and gain actionable knowledge about society. So they talked about how service learning helps students define their passions and priorities, understand how to participate in societal systems. It builds agency and critical thinking skills, which we heard about earlier. And it's practice. They were able to practice those workplace skills like problem solving, public speaking, doing research, and collaboration. So that direct connection to college and career readiness through these experiences. And I did just want to share that the participants developed this college relevant skills and traits gained from service learning. So all of these skill sets that are preparing our students for adulthood were identified through these convenings. So just a few next steps and recommendations. So for mental health, the field really wants to see more resources that support impacting mental health of our youth and educators. That direct connection to social emotional learning efforts, and building awareness on how the youth brain development is impacted by these service learning experiences to help build that case. For the equitable and inclusive systems, they wanted more methods of monitoring the impact of service learning, how to integrate service learning into accountability systems, and how to create a space for learning and sharing, along with how we can unite communities and combat political polarization. So looking at developing more programs and resources to help bring communities together and help bridge divides. Then from learning, the learning from the service learning field, they really want to see us continue to use the National Service Learning Conference as well as other convenings like this one to receive guidance from service learning practitioners. So an opportunity for our educators, our students, our community members to share their voices and what they're seeing and what they want to see us do as the field. And also a greater space for people to come together to really have these conversations and guide the development of future resources and programs. And then for supporting youth and preparing them for the future, definitely the cry was for wanting more resources that support those job skills and career exploration. I really encourage you to download the full report. It's available on the link that Youth Service America put in the chat and also on our website. And of course, you can reach out to me with questions, but definitely an opportunity for the service learning field to make a greater impact around these spaces and to continue to bring our educators and students together to really hear what's happening in the field and be able to respond accordingly. And with that, I will turn it back over to Mike.
Great. Thank you so much, Amy. And moving right along, want to hear before we, in these last 10 minutes, from the perspective of young people themselves. And so Cameron, from Volunteer Iowa, who is the staff lead on many things there around youth service, including supporting the Iowa Statewide Youth Advisory Council, who did this statewide survey and series of focus groups to hear the perspectives of young people about this. So with that, I'll turn it over to her to share the results that they found.
Thank you, Mike. So I'm going to share my screen too.
And then Cameron, just remember to turn your camera off if you want that full screen. Yep.
There we go. Okay. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I am actually representing our two youth volunteers who were really the leaders on this report, Claire Hesselink and Suman Ko. They are volunteers with us on our youth outreach subcommittee. And when we started working in this field as a youth service zone grantee with YSA, we knew we wanted to, survey what's happening in Iowa. And we did that across sectors, so through schools and nonprofits and after school partners. And then we knew we wanted to hear from youth directly. And if we were going to be engaging with youth and adults about, encouraging more youth voice, it just made sense for us to also do that. So these two youth have been, phenomenal in this work, and I'm really proud of what they've established. So yeah, happy to present kind of what they found. So this is a survey we sent directly to Iowan youth. Survey results came from all across the state. There was very rural towns like St. Charles, Iowa has about 640 people living in it, in comparison to like Des Moines, which is our metro capital. So it was nice to get results from youth from various different sizes of towns and different communities, and then to look and see what barriers face them depending on where they're from. So they had sent it to youth from different age groups, so from 5 to 24. A majority of the responses did come from that kind of 10th through 12th grade high school students. A big part of that too is just because that's Suman and Claircha's like network of youth that they know, and fellow sort of age appropriate. So it kind of makes sense that that's who they heard back from, depending on how they marketed it. But it is still kind of cool to see like a 1st to 3rd grader responding on this. In terms of demographics, these were the only questions we asked so far. This was kind of intended to be a preliminary survey, so we're hoping to do another one with Claircha and Suman's help where we can kind of dig deeper into some of the topics and kind of divide it up by, again, that rural community versus metro and the different barriers faced depending on different students' lives. So so about 201 people responded. And generally, most of the questions were just about volunteering and barriers they face. So when we asked where do most students find volunteer opportunities, we see a lot of that word of mouth happening here. And focus groups, this is a big thing we heard too. A lot of the times they would hear it from schools or the adult partners in their life. When it comes to when they say that they heard from community organizations, we did not ask if that was through social media, but in our follow-up sort of focus groups, they actually said that they found them through the newspaper, that their parents would hear about it in like a local news posting and then share it with the students. And I think that's the main way that they'd heard from the actual organizations themselves, or in those more like rural communities and you just know of an organization. You might only have one sort of volunteer opportunity at a nonprofit or something like that. So of course they just kind of hear from them naturally. And then places of worship was another big one. So I think this is interesting when we look at ways that we can promote volunteering to youth. It's really gaining that trust of those adult partners in their life. And then in terms of barriers, lack of time was the number one reason. They could select multiple reasons, but that kind of stood out to us. Obviously, youth have part-time jobs, family to take care of, extracurricular activities. So this is really a good kind of result to then push for service learning opportunities. When we had our focus group sessions with youth, they were really interested in the idea of having more service days, just more service projects in general, even if it's not service learning, but happening within the classroom. Another big thing too that we've heard, even from Claircha and Suman, who serve on the State of Iowa Youth Advisory Council through the Iowa Department of Human Rights, this is a volunteer opportunity and they're giving their time to really develop their leadership skills and amplify other youth voices across the state. And sometimes you would have to like miss a day of school for a big project with them. And then schools would not count that as incentive volunteer hours that they could get for graduation, or they would get like punished for that. So it's kind of a thin line to walk between balancing education and then balancing these opportunities as well. And kind of a conflict that arises there. The pandemic was also obviously a big reason. I think what this really says is there's a lack of offsite opportunities for students, especially when we look at that like 1st to 3rd grader, those younger students. Families oftentimes can't dedicate a whole afternoon to volunteering. So if we can develop more of those opportunities, then that can hopefully combat some of those barriers that the pandemic brings with it. And then lack of information, just general awareness of what time they need to be someplace, what time they'll be done, what they'll be doing. That is something that youth really like to hear from our focus groups. They just would talk a lot about wanting to know exactly what they were getting into, because then they're in a space that they feel comfortable. They feel like they have an understanding of what they're doing, of their impact. That is highly desirable. They would bring up stories of like, my dad would be like, oh, I just would show up and ask if this person needed help. And they found that like not something that they were interested in doing. So kind of that generation gap there as well. And then age restrictions was not as high as we kind of expected. But again, we're looking at the reports were majorly from high school students from 10th through 12th grade, so maybe 16 up. But if we broke this down a little bit more and kind of looked at those probably under the age of 13, we might see more barriers with that. So just, again, incorporating family volunteering opportunities as well as youth volunteering opportunities. Lack of interest was pretty low, which is great to see. I think a lot of the times when this is low, it's just I think when we're looking at this number, though, can we think of ways like, if lack of interest is so low, then why aren't more youth volunteering, right? So what can we do to kind of increase that, even if like clearly these other barriers have a big impact on them then? Despite the barriers, most Iowan youth do feel that volunteering is accessible. I'm taking this from the angle that everybody who took this survey are volunteering in some form of capacity. It's just kind of, if I wanted to volunteer, would I be able to find it, versus like, I want to volunteer. So I think when we look at like this as 70%, but clearly not 70% of Iowan youth are volunteering, right? It's more of that 23%. So even though they feel that it's accessible, why aren't they then? What's not why aren't they being motivated to seek these opportunities and to actually serve? In terms of what motivates Iowan youth, a lot of it was for the joy of helping others rather than sort of the incentive benefits that come along with volunteering. When we met in our focus groups, though, a lot of the students mentioned that they would initially start serving for recognition at their graduation at high school. And then they would continue to do it because they found this joy. So sort of getting them through that door of, yes, maybe you start doing this because of an award, but then you continue to do it because you feel that joy. But I do think any way you can market an opportunity to, increase, have a letter of recommendation from your adult supervisor to put on a college application or anything like that, that's a way to get youth to start kind of being more appealed to this. Another big thing that came up was, like in Iowa, we have an incentive program where if you serve a certain number of hours in your school, you get to wear like a cord at graduation. And that starts usually when you're a 9th grader, and it could be like 200 hours committed. But a lot of youth would say, I don't have transportation when I'm still a freshman in high school. I'm kind of nervous about those types of things. I need to build that confidence more. So they won't start actually doing these programs until they're like 16, like their junior year of high school. And then at that point, they'd be like, 200 hours is a lot to try to get in 2 years rather than 4. And they'll be demotivated to even start. So they don't end up doing service at all because of those reasons. So I think when we look at these programs, how you can kind of tier it so you can still get this award, even if you're not doing that full 200 hours because you've only been able to serve for 2 years rather than 4. And then these are some youth perspectives on how the community could make service more accessible, just more opportunities, more ways to serve. Transportation is a big thing. If schools have student permits that allow them to go to school-related functions, trying to associate that with volunteer opportunities, volunteer hours during the school day, of course, and then just in general, more information about what exists, and having those schools be the one to really share that opportunity with students. And then again, here are some more reasons. There is a push. People would like social media, particularly Snapchat or Instagram. Like TikTok is another big thing too, platforms that youth are on rather than like Facebook. And then this is a really good point too, that it feels like you have to already be existing in this sphere. You hear about these opportunities because you're already volunteering. So how can we reach youth who haven't served yet and get them more existing in a realm where service is the norm, and then feel like they can continue to find other opportunities? And then these are just some nice quotes about what volunteerism means to Iowan youth. It's interesting to just hear their perspectives and think of the different ways that we view volunteering. When I had kind of entered this field, I thought a lot of youth might not consider advocacy work as a form of service. But when we met in the focus groups, a lot of them said that that's actually the way that they do serve. Like direct service is another big way, but advocacy, they do consider service. So that's exciting to hear how they can get a little bit more creative in the ways that they volunteer. And then these are just some volunteering experiences that they've had. It's interesting to see the diversity. Some people doing international service, others just working at their local humane society, helping students with their English. I think this is just a great way to show that no matter kind of where you're from or what organizations are around you, there are different ways to serve, but I think there is kind of needing to bridge that gap of information and have these stories from youth specifically to tell other youth that there are, serving can be different ways, and it can match your skills and interests rather than maybe the traditional way that you think of it. Yeah, so that is the presentation, and it is on the 50 by 250. So you're more than happy to kind of review that too. But yeah, thank you. And feel free to reach out if you'd like to hear more about the work that Suman and Claire have done.
Thank you so much, Cameron, and thank you to everyone, Rachel and Amy, and the team in Iowa. Hopefully this was helpful for everyone, and specifically on the Iowa piece. While it is just the perspective from one state, and some of the information might be some of the results might be specific to Iowa. We think a lot of what you found would hold true for young people across the country. So we wanted to make sure to share that. We hope that the different perspectives of hearing from K-12 principals and from some of the state service commissions and kind of the infrastructure groups, the service learning field, and some young people, give us all a good sense of where we're starting from as a field towards reaching this 50% goal. And as many of us go into work over the next year around providing opportunities on days of service or building capacity in the field through our Youth Service Zone program for all of the grantees that are on the call today. Again, all of this information and all of the full reports are on the website. The link is in the chat, 50by250.org. So you can delve deeper into all of that data, and sorry that you could not see any of the prevalence survey slides at the beginning as I was going through that, and you had to stare at my face while I was reading those results. But those are all there that you can all dig into, and we'll be doing some deeper analysis of that in the coming months, and publishing a full report. But the top line data is there and has some really interesting things. So again, thank you to everyone for joining us today as we kick off our Youth Service Institute for summer of 2022 and launch the 50% Youth Participation by America 250 campaign. If you have not signed on yet as a partner and signed the Declaration of Participation, please go to 50by250.org to do that, so that we can keep you all in the loop and on the details of the campaign going forward. We definitely need everyone in on working together for the common good, the common expectation, and common experience of every young person in America. So with that, we'll end this, and thank you again.